This eaH meeting is in recognition of the 120th anniversary of the Engineers and Architects of Hawaii's founding in 1902. The meeting mostly focuses on the early years, the 5 previously unknown presidents, the meeting locations, and what the first meetings were like. Bill Blackman prepared a surprise 120th anniversary cake for the Friday meeting.
Our president next to us can say some words about what we're going to be hearing today.
I believe Sam is going to share with us a brief history, or I should say an in-depth history of the past 120 years, including 5 past unbeknownst presidents that he's uncovered through his research. So it should be very interesting.
Need some humor.
Yeah.
Humor.
No, it's been 6 weeks now since we had any humor. I'll share with you. A man tells a rabbi, "I have a strong desire to live forever. What can I do?" "Get married," replies the rabbi. "And will I live forever?" "No, but the desire will disappear." Oh, wow. That's the humor for the day.
Engineers and Architects is 120 years old in February of this year. These are some pictures of past presidents that I was able to find. And you'll see that I'm not listing Alonzo Gartley as the first president. Robert, I think it's Frick, was the temporary president in February and March when they were first organizing the organizations. These are all the names of the association over the last 120 years. Honolulu Engineering Association up to 1906. Honolulu Engineering, Hawaii Engineering Association, 1906 to 1920. They changed it because they had members that were joining from the neighbor islands. So they wanted to change it so that it was Hawaiian Engineering Association. 1920, they joined the American Association of Engineers as a Hawaii chapter. I don't think it worked out very well. They were only associated with them for about 5 years, and then they went independent again in 1925 when the Engineering Association, they renamed it the Engineering Association of Hawaii, which it was like that until 1991. Ken Sprague, who was with the city, and he was a past president in 1991, he suggested that we should change it to Engineers and Architects Hawaii, because we did have a number of architects that were in the firm, and that historically have had architects in the firm. And I'm doing this history based somewhat on a history that was done in 1977, and it was narrated in 1977. Bill, you may remember this because they prepared a slideshow, and automatic slideshow. And I think most people in here will remember, with the exception of maybe Aaron, of where it was a cassette inside of a box with a screen, and you pushed the button and it was recorded. And there was a recording that matched up with the slides, and it went about 15 minutes, I think. And I recreated that slideshow with the first video in our YouTube. And so if you go and look at that, you can see, and he narrated that. And in the background there is Wayne Mitter, who was a past president of Engineers and Architects of Hawaii. One of the interesting thing about Walter is that when I met him in about 1987, he was confined to a wheelchair, but he would always come to the meetings and on a regular basis. And he had a specialized tricycle that was motorized, and he could wheel his wheelchair into the tricycle and lock himself in, and then he would drive back to Waikiki after the meeting. I never saw him going down the street or that. I wish I had. Walter worked on the Kahala Access Road with Austin and Associates, and this is the road that goes up. You can see it here, and then it goes up. I don't think I'm showing it. It goes up here, and then all the way up to the top of the mountain. And he talked about the pretty steep slopes of, 1,000-foot drop on some of them. And you can hike that apparently. And you go in and hike up, and then you go along the ridge, and then you come back down. And I think it's a few miles away. I don't know if it's a 20-mile hike or not, but it's a good hike all the way up. Good, it's good exercise. I think it's probably good scenery as well. And the other guy that did history with us was Dr. Konstantinos Papacosta. We all called him Costas. And he was our president in 2009. And he was researching the history of the HCES. And he kept on coming across the Engineering Association. So he decided he better find out who we are. And he ended up joining us and become a past president. And unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago. So this is our logo. And for those of you who haven't seen how it goes together, the E and the A and the H, this was a graphic that Maria Tomei prepared. And I've been using it. So if you see it in our YouTube video, it's in our new ones for the introduction. Yeah, this is the evening bulletin that was published in 1902, February, talking about the meeting that they had on the 15th, Saturday, in San Antonio Hall on Vineyard Street, which is on the property of the Pacific Club, which we were talking about. They talked about fuses, and Lieutenant Holmes of the U.S. Navy also participated along with Manager Gartley. And R.S. Frick was elected as the temporary president. This is Mr. Frick. This is, he came from Germany. He arrived here when he was 18, and he was immediately hired as a Luna or a supervisor. And I think his high school in Germany probably was an apprenticeship program. So he probably came over here and maybe considered himself as somewhat of a trained engineer because he got hired as a right off the bat at the sugar mill. These are a couple other meeting notices that came from, they're basically exactly the same, but they came from two different papers. And I think the two papers actually, the morning edition and the evening edition. One's the Pacific, the Pacific Commercial Advertiser and the Hawaiian Gazette. I like the way that they word this. Among the technical men, there has been formed the Honolulu Engineering Association, which has gathered in already the principal men in the electrical and mechanical engineer lines in the city. So let's go see where the San Antonio Hall is. So this is a map. This is Punch Bowl. This is Queens Hospital. And San Antonio Hall is right here. This Pacific Club is in this area right here. So in a little bit more detail, here's San Antonio Hall down at the bottom. And this is a picture. So it's right here. I don't know, somebody may have remembered this is Vineyard Street. But I'm sure that they widened it to make it this big. And I don't know which direction they widened it. Do anybody remember which way they widened it? They widened it towards the mountain or towards the ocean? Anybody remember? Mac, I'm asking you.
Well, everything always tilts toward the sea, so I'd say.
They probably moved it towards the sea, huh? Okay. So then it's probably right about where these tennis courts are. So this is Vineyard, and so it was probably right about here behind this wall. This is saying that on April, 37 members were elected to join. The president was Alonzo Gartley. And also, if you look, you can see that H.G. Janaka talked about valves. And this is Janaka, who is famous for his pineapple coring machine, which was designated Hawaiian Engineering National Monument. And here is Alonzo Gartley, came over from Philadelphia and was hired as a manager of Hawaiian Electric. And at that time, the manager also ran the business side of the company. And it stayed like that until another past president, and that was Hicks, but the power plant is named after him. And then after Hicks came in as the president handled the business side of the company as well.
When you say business side, Hawaiian Electric actually sold appliances in its early history.
That's right. And it also had a ice business as well. It was for a number of years, it was making ice. And, he died when he was 52. And apparently it was from a surgical operation. And so it was a little bit sudden. And by that time, in 1910, he had left and joined the Sea Bureau as a consulting engineer.
Since I saw it was 101 years since Alonzo's passing, I visited his grave and took this picture of his headstone.
On that April, they had moved from the San Antonio Hall and were meeting in the YWCA, which was on the corner of Alakea Street and Hotel Street. And this is a blow up of that little section there. And this is a picture of the old building. And this is the location on Bishop Square. Basically, this parking structure is there now. And but in 1906 on the map, it actually shows, the YMCA is here, and it's also the YMCA is across the street. They have another building here. I haven't found a picture of that building. And Henry Janaka is known for his pineapple coring machine, as I mentioned earlier. But he's also, that year in 1902, or it's just 1906, I think, he invented this cane harvesting machine. I don't know how successful this machine is or not, or was, but it was claimed to, increase production of the cane fields.
Yeah.
For the second meeting in that time, they talked about, they actually had opened up a reading room, and that they had 56 members and 30 applications. So the headline says, approaching century mark in membership. So that's pretty good membership growth. I wish we could do something like that. See, this is the semi-annual meeting, but they had moved to the Castle and Cook Assembly Hall, which is at the corner of King and Bethel. W.F. Hansen was elected as the chairman. And I believe, he was the state electrical inspector. And it says that they put the library, moved the library and the reading room to the elite building. So this is the corner of Bethel and King Street, a bit better picture there. This is Castle and Cook's building right there. And I had a hard time trying to find a picture of it, but this is an old ad. And this is the building. This is the elite building where they put the library in. And that's on, I believe it's on Hotel Street. Here they wrote an entire column about the dinner that they had. They elected, this is the next 6 months. The terms of the presidency were only 6 months, and R.J. Pratt was elected as the chairman, and 70 members attended, which is over 60 people. I think this is another meeting where he talked about polyphase induction motors. And they also listed in that article all of the people that attended. I didn't count up if this number actually adds up to 60 or not, but here we see Mr. Janaka is there, and also down at the bottom, a future president, Edward Brown, is present. And these are Alonzo's words. Mr. Gartley referred to the engineering profession as a growth of the last half century in the United States. It was the duty of all members to give the engineering society their best endeavors so that engineering and those who follow it should have their proper standing in the community. In that meeting, they were singing. So they had a tuxedo quartet. And the guys that were there And there was a guy by Bechtel. I don't know if he's related to the big Bechtel or not. Maybe he was, but he played the English horn, which had a mellow tone. This is the 1904 annual meeting of Smoker. And this is some humor. I think I'm going to talk about some humor here, I think, in this announcement, that it is far better to smoke here than hereafter. And then it says carriages can be ordered for 11:30 and will be told when to come again. And then at the bottom, it says every member not over 4 years in arrears for dues is invited to attend and be tested. They actually had a test, and we'll talk about that. But it was a joke because the association is only 3 years old. So, I mean, you couldn't be 4 years in arrears on your dues. So basically, everybody comes. That year in March 1904, Mr. Skinner was elected as a chairman, and he was an electrical engineer with Hawaiian Electric. And he was a friend of Alonzo Gartley. I found this little article because they talk about people. They list everybody that went on the ships to the neighbor islands or to the mainland. They talk about the sailings, and they list everybody that comes in and go out. And so they listed that Alonzo, manager of Hawaiian Electric Company, is spending 2 weeks in Hilo, taking a well-deserved vacation. He is accompanied by W.E. Skinner. And he was chairman for 6 months. And then he was elected for another 6 months. And there was another smoker. And the next annual meeting, they actually went up the Haleiwa Hotel. The trip down will be enlivened by cards and the discussion of most rapid means to erect bridges and square the circle. There will be songs and stories, smoke and smoke talk. The special train will leave for town when the banqueters are ready to go. And it talks about the for the people who were organizing that. At that meeting, George E. Watt was elected as the chairman for 6 months. And here's, he was actually from England and was trained as a locomotive engineer. But when he came here, he started working on the sugar plantations. And I think that's because he probably knew about steam and steam engines. And here's some pictures of the Haleiwa Hotel. So they would have came in on the train. Here, this is water now, but the train came across here. Here's the hotel, and here's the Rainbow Bridge right here. So there's a steakhouse here right now. I was never quite sure where this was up in Haleiwa, but this picture, I think, pretty well clarifies what that is. And of course, you would have walked across this little bridge, which is a nice bridge. Walked up to the hotel, which had a very nice veranda on it. Another picture of the front of the hotel. I don't know if this is the front or the back. Do you ever go to that hotel, Mac?
When I was a kid, I remember we drove by and I saw this structure. So it must have still been there in the 40s.
Yeah. And this is some pictures inside. It's really a crime that they tore this down and didn't maintain it. So the next year, the next annual meeting in 2006, Chairman Edward C. Brown was elected. When I first started this, it was kind of like it said Edward C. Brown, and then next to it was unknown. So I did a Google search and found that he was referenced in a historic building report. And anyway, and so I found this information based on that. And he was here for 11 years. And then he went to Asia for a few years. And then he went back to the mainland for 2 years, and then went down to South America. And then he came back and was the president of Dearborn Chemicals. It was actually Dearborn Drug and Chemicals. And this is the building that had his reference, and this is over on Ward. This is Ward, and this is a reinforced concrete building. And you can see it was built in 1928 and it says Dearborn on it. He wasn't there when it was built, but this is how I found him. So, and actually he is reelected and he serves the first full term of 12 months. This is a history article that was written about the Engineering Association, whole article about it. And it talks about that the first meeting was on February 1st, and it was named Engineering Association of Hawaii. And it started meeting it met in the Castle and Cook building and the lawn. And I haven't found out where that is. And then the Kapilani building, where we'll talk about in a minute. And this is the Kapilani building, which is at the corner of Alakea and King Street. This is a blow up. This is the Kapilani building right here. And that's a picture of it right on the corner there. And it's interesting to look, they're starting, and Alan Lloyd said previously that these are not power lines, that these are telephone lines. And if you see here, you can see they've installed a lot more, I think, telephone lines here going out. And here's a picture of Alakea and King, and what's there today. Next annual meeting was 2006, and it was a bathing party at the Seaside Hotel. Anybody know where the Seaside Hotel is?
No, in Hilo, right? No,
No.
there is a seaside. There is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's down where Sanssouci is.
Well, here's some advertisements for Seaside Hotel. Here's some pictures of the Seaside
It's where
Hotel.
Rushi is.
Well, actually, it's where the Royal Hawaiian was. They tore this down and built the Royal Hawaiian.
Oh,
And here's a gathering in 1903 at the Seaside Hotel. And so what were the meetings like, the eaH meetings? So you'd see a notice like this one. There will be a meeting in the Honolulu Engineering Association in Symphony Society Corner, Richard and Hotel, another location where, and Carl Waldreier of Lanai will give a paper on water development. And he came from Maui, special trip, I imagine, or maybe he was coming over here anyway. But you would go there and to the meeting and probably take one of these horse-drawn streetcars. This is on King Street, obviously. And maybe you'd come to the YMCA, or this is a picture I finally found of the Castle and Cook building on King Street. And this is Carl Waldreier from Maui. He gave a presentation. His paper was reprinted in the paper, and it was everything there. And I don't know if you can imagine trying to sit through a reading of one of these presentations, and that's not the end of it. Actually includes columns on the second page. And so I imagine, I don't know how much he read, but they talk about reading these papers. And they sign them as well, signed by Carl, respectively contributed to the Hawaii Engineering Association, November 21st, 1904. And he had apparently some lantern slides, not slideshows, lantern slides, and I'll talk about that in a minute. This is the water falling down from the roof in the tunnel. Another picture, I think this is of the pump coming out of the tunnel, where they're pumping the water out from the tunnel. This is a lantern projector. This thing had an arc tube, and this is a this is a chimney to get rid of the heat from that lamp. And these are the slides that are specially prepared to go in there, piece of wooden. And then the glass slide, they're usually a glass slide when they were first doing this.
The color of those is hand painted.
Yeah, I think, yes. This is another, the Trans-Pacific telephone. And just not going to read this, obviously, but it has 4 pages and then this nice diagram of where it's talking about a radio link across the ocean, obviously. But the paper, Hawaiian Engineering Association became somewhat famous because they would have visitors come in, and I think those visitors went back and told their libraries about the papers that the association was producing, and so they got requests from New York, Milwaukee, Kansas City, and St. Louis asked for the papers from the association to be furnished to them. I think most of you have seen this gate that's right down below us, right in front of Topa Towers on this is Queen Street out here. And I've always kind of wondered where this gate came from. So I saw this picture of the gate, and it says it's the old courthouse. And so where's the old courthouse? This is another picture of the old courthouse. This is the old courthouse. This is Queen Street, and this is the AmFac building before these 2 towers were built. This used to be the AmFac towers. And this is the AmFac building right here. It's on the corner of Fort and Queen Street. And C. Brewer is right about here. You can see C. Brewer's right there. So if you look at this, this is the old courthouse. This is AmFac's old building. And you can just see right here is a picture of the gate, the side of the gate. So if we go back, you can see that this is the gate. They basically, if you're looking at the C. Brewer building, which is still there, this is about where that gate would have been. And right around the corner over here is where they moved it to. Okay, I think that's it. I can go back and to any slides if anybody has some questions, and I want to try to get into the habit of asking our people online to ask a question first. Anybody online have a question?
Sam, I don't have a question, but I want to tell you a Walter Gibbons story. You may remember, as I do, Walter as a kind of gruff, slow-talking old guy. Must have been about 1976 or 77, our program, and I don't remember the speaker, was on the latest advancements in computer technology, both hardware and software. Very detailed, very well done. And he said, okay, I'll take questions. And Walter raised his hand. He said, what's this software stuff?
Lee Mansfield, when I was coming to the meetings, and I said he was in the wheelchair, he would have lunch, and then he'd almost immediately fall asleep as soon as the speaker said something. Well, what Lee remembers is that when the questions and answers started, he would wake up and he would ask a question like that. What's this software stuff? Yeah, he was a gruff guy, but I think he was a nice guy. I'm sorry.
With a heart of gold.
Any other questions, Barbara?
Did the organization do anything special for the 100th anniversary?
Yeah, we did. Bill remembers that. We actually went down to the Hilton Hawaiian Village and had a meeting down at the Hilton Hawaiian Village for the 100th anniversary.
Okay.
Somehow the 120th didn't seem as important. I don't know why.
Maybe the 125th.
Yeah, maybe.
So what
Question.
about the women in the number of women in your organization? How many presidents were female?
I think I can count on one hand. Mary Ellen Nordak Grace was our first, I think probably the first female president. And then Kai Andrade probably followed her a little bit later. And then Maria Tomei is the last one that I remember.
Okay.
So Barbara, since you're now a member,
Yeah.
we're going to nominate you to be president for
Oh,
next year.
oh, thank you.
Yeah, that's how I got to be president, Margaret.
Oh, I see.
Grant, you had a question?
I was curious if it was formed by members of the Hawaiian Electric Company, kind of why they or how they branched out and added a community, you know.
Well, when I was looking at Alonzo Gartley's history, I don't know quite why I got this idea, but he was in Philadelphia. And so I did a search for engineering associations in Philadelphia. It turns out there's an engineering association of Philadelphia that actually is probably the oldest engineering association, older than us. It was in 1887 or 1877 when they started. And they are very active. And I saw some pictures. They had big banquets of 50 people and whatnot. So they're still very active in Philadelphia. And Alonzo was in Philadelphia in the 1890s for about 10 years. And since the other thing, I got a lot of this information from these books are called The Men and Women of Honolulu. And in that book, if you listen, the early ones, they listed all of the clubs they belonged to. And there was people, they'd list 5, 6, 7, a dozen different clubs that they all belonged to. Commercial club, and they also listed one called the Odd Man's Club. And I found out that's still around. But my point is that they were in these associations. And so I have a strong feeling that Alonzo probably went to it. And when he came here, he probably had an idea of that we should have one. Honolulu should have an engineering association. So I think he wanted to form that. So they were going to have this technical meeting talking about fuses. And I think maybe he contacted some engineers locally and said, do you want to come to this meeting? We're going to be talking about fuses. And Robert Fick, the first chairman, he would have been about 24 years old at that time. And he had just been promoted to the Oahu, or hired by the Oahu Sugar Company as their head loomer or assistant head loomer. But he's 24 years old and he's running a sugar plant which generates burning the gas and generating steam and generating electricity. It's not a small operation. So I think he probably wanted to have get some advice from other engineers. I would definitely like advice if I was only 24 years old and running a sugar plantation. And electricity was new, so talking about fuses was probably very useful. So I think they went to that meeting, and Alonzo, I suspect it was Alonzo, say, let's form an association of engineers here in Hawaii. So, and I think he obviously knew that he had to invite people from outside of Hawaiian Electric. It shouldn't be just a Hawaiian Electric company club. But saying that, there have been 4 or 5 people from Hawaiian Electric who have been, I mentioned Hicks, who was one. I forgot. This is in the Wiliki. I wrote an article for the Wiliki and it talks about the different engineers. I'll go back to that picture I had earlier about who they were. But Bill Bonnet here was a vice president in Hawaiian Electric, and he's also a past president of engineers and architects. 1977, Bill? Is that what you're?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So let me go back to that picture.
If you were asking, Grant, about the history of the electric company, if I understood your question, but this was usually a consolidation of early generating systems that were put in for industrial purposes, whether it was sugar or pineapple or ice production.
Okay, and everybody see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Harry, well, let's see, Leslie Hicks was a president. And let's see if there's any other ones here. Board of Water Supply, Frederick Ork. John Wilson, a past three-term mayor of Honolulu. And George Wright was also a mayor of Honolulu. For a number of years, we met over by Thomas Square when John Young was the president. And George Collins was a Bishop Estate trustee. And Charles Dickey, who's a famous architect. Okay, it's getting close to 1 o'clock. And one of the things I want to do, or we want to do, I think, is try and end the Zoom meeting at 1 o'clock. So you guys can all get back to work, and these meetings can kind of go on and on if we don't put a line. And we're famous for ending things on time at 1 o'clock.
And we retirees, we can get back to sleep.
Yeah.
So any final comments or anything from you guys online? And then we're going to close it out for the day.
Well, thank you very much for doing all that research.
We'll see you.
Aloha.
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 Engineers and architects of Hawaii welcome your comments on this program and any of our recent programs. We encourage your direct participation in this community outreach. So please email us your comments and ideas at eahawaii@gmail.com.